Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be joined this morning by Andrew Rupp, baritone, member of the BBC Singers, and most importantly, from our perspective, our soloist as Elijah in our concert on the 22nd of March in St Andrew's Garrison Church in Aldershot. Andrew, thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to me.
My pleasure, and I'm. It's nice to be a returning soloist, although I don't think I've been to that venue. I can't remember where it was the last time, but no, I'm really looking forward to it.
No, you came to St Thomas on the Bourne in Farnham in October
Thank you.
2022 to sing the De Rufflé Requiem, as I recall.
Yeah, and mystical. It was mystical songs plus the De Rufflé because the De Rufflé is only about 7 bars, although they're quite dramatic, so you tend to remember it. So yeah,
Well, we certainly enjoyed singing with you then, and are very much looking forward
likewise.
to Elijah now. But before we get on to Elijah, maybe we could just you could just tell us a little bit about your career as a singer. I mean, I see from your profile that you were a boy chorister,
Yes,
and then a choral scholar, but didn't
yeah,
go straight into professional singing. So why don't you just talk us through your early career as a singer and
sure. Yeah, I mean, I was all set to become a chemical engineer, and having been a chorister, the music was always there, and I did try escaping it for a couple of years as an early teenager, and didn't tell anyone at my new school that I'd done that. But of course, they knew, and I got press ganged very appropriately into a production of HMS Pinafore when I was 14 or so, 15. Um, and I'm so grateful for the two teachers. I mean, they were. I remember them cornering me in the corridor, the long corridor of doom near the headmaster's office, telling me that yes, I would be in the production, even though I hadn't appeared anywhere in the volunteer line. And I ended up singing the bosun in that, and never looked back from that point of view. I mean, it didn't sort of change the sort of ideas I had about what I might do, but it did lead to things that meant that even though I then continued on the sort of scientific path with doing the natural sciences course at Cambridge, I also went as a choral scholar. So obviously, you are of a certain standard to do that, and it's a big commitment. And so that's where my sort of parallel universes were combining. By the end of my time at university, having sung loads and managed to somehow come out with a degree, I was still split a bit. But the one thing I was, because most of the people I'd sung with were all pure singing. That's what they were going to do. So that sort of opened up ideas for me. But I didn't want to do it straight away, which is where I differed from my friends and colleagues. And
would
just
would
headed.
most choral scholars at Cambridge have been reading music? Was it unusual to be doing natural sciences?
It was, yeah. I mean, for there was one practical reason. For instance, I couldn't apply to King's, for instance. Not that I actually wanted to. I was at my first choice as it happened, but just for the pure logistical reason of the King's evensongs are an hour earlier, and means you can't do either science or engineering because of laboratory times. So if you're at King's, you never get King's choral scholars who are doing science degrees. So that just being that 1 hour later, that's if I wasn't skiving the labs, meant I could do that. So and yes, I was certainly the only natural scientists in my year group, but I subsequently discovered that a certain Sir Simon Keedney-side was also a natural scientist. So there were a few of us, and I'm not quite in his league, but he's relevant because he's somebody I heard sing Elijah recently. But we'll come on to that.
Well, yes, you are
They weren't all musicians, but that was common.
you are in his league because I think I know what that Elijah was because I was talking not so long ago to your colleague Edward Price. I
Ah,
think he was
okay.
probably singing alongside you in that
He
concert.
was. Yeah, he was.
But
Yeah.
as you say, we'll come back to Elijah. But you're a choral scholar. Was it Canterbury Cathedral? You was choral, sorry, a chorister, boy
Yeah,
chorister.
chorister at Canterbury, which is my hometown. Um, I'm delighted in subsequent years that my two sons went through that as well. So I had the great pleasure of singing in the back row occasionally as a dep, with my son singing in front of me in the as choristers. So
Oh,
that was
terrific.
very nice for me as a personal thing, and they seem to have come through it unscathed, now in their early 20s. So
Very,
so
very
yeah,
good.
Canterbury is where it started.
So Canterbury, then choral scholar at Cambridge, and then, as you
Yeah,
say, um, not sort of well, tell us in your own words that you didn't go straight into professional singing. You did.
sure. I mean the one thing. So I had it as a sort of vague. Well, not no. I had it as an aim to do it. I had I think a sort of vague timetable, which I knew was eminently flexible, of say a 5 year thing. So that would have taken me to my late 20s, and I just made sure I was doing a. I mean, I did turn down some good opportunities career wise that were not in London because I needed to be in London for the singing because it's such a busy. There's, I mean, less so now, but at that time, because we're talking the very late 80s when I first turned up in London, it was, incredibly busy on what I call the session circuit. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of the church and cathedral choirs are all there, but all the extra work that goes on top is absolutely to the fore. So I was there on the very edge of it because obviously I was committed to a full-time job, which happened to be in the city, and I got to a point. So if I just fast forward very quickly, um, got to a point where I thought, right, I'd like to have a go now, and various things had come along, and my peers in from music, sort of, having sounded them out, they said, yeah, you should, if you want to do it. But it was quite amusing, really, when I look back, because all my musician friends thought I was a complete idiot to give up a well-paid job to join them. But I've never regretted it. Whereas all the people I worked with thought it was fantastic because somebody was. I always turned it the golden handcuffs. I was either brave or stupid enough to chop them off and go out and into the singing world, which I've done now since was it mid 90s. So it's quite an innings so
It
far.
is.
So I haven't regretted it.
Well, that's very good to hear, and obviously, those of us who love singing would salute your decision and be delighted that you
Yeah.
that you took it. But somewhere along the way, I think it about 2007, you became a BBC singer as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. It was a sort of I suppose by its very nature has been quite a haphazard path because I was trying out things. I think one of the things that I kept with me the whole time, having done what I did before, was acceptance that it might not work out. So I was free, also because of how I'd gone about things. I was free to take a few risks that you might not do if you've come through the normal singing system. You just have to take everything that comes along, and whereas I could sort of sit back and think, yes, I'd like to do that. That would be better, particularly operatically, which is I ended up doing quite a lot of, because I was free to give it a go, even though I hadn't done any formal training. I mean, much to my and my then teacher's amazement, I got cast pretty much straight away, and things happened, which was fantastic. And I was straight in at the deep end. I mean, that's not totally unusual, but um, for instance, my wife is a trained opera singer and still works as one, and she did the traditional conservatoire route, which is it's something I just came in from left field.
Yes, that's quite unusual, isn't it? And looking at your profile, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of opera as well as sort of oratorio and sort of concert performances. I mean, how do you balance all that? Do you have any preference? Is there a common thread to all of that work?
I think the common thread is that I never turned my back on my choral singing. So even when I was um, away, singing at places I never thought I'd sing at, or at home. So I mean, my sort of training ground was at Glyndebourne, which is not a bad place to go to, and uh, I I was, even though I was doing stuff like that, I was still singing at my my Sunday job at the Temple Church in London, I just kept going all through it. Even though there was one year when I only appeared once in the whole year, but they were pleased to keep me as the official baritone one on Decani, if people know what that is. So so I've always kept that. The common thread's the choral, and everything else has come around it. Not necessarily more importantly or less importantly. It's just different sorts of music, and I've been very fortunate to be able to do the different sorts. And going back to your question about, because you mentioned about joining the BBC, that I did, although for until 3 years ago I was doing that as a job share, so I had a lot of flexibility, but I knew inevitably I was having to choose between one or the other. So I was happy at that point in deciding to take on the job that the operatic work would drop away, because basically I stopped auditioning for things. Things still came along and I was able to make it work, but I knew that would be a shift in focus. And again, I'm delighted, because it's a pretty good place to be if you're a choral scholar. Sorry, choral singer. I mean, I'm
Yes,
certainly
indeed.
not a scholar.
But then you must have had a difficult moment in, gosh, how long ago was it? Is it 2 years ago? I mean, when the future of the BBC Singers sort of came
Mm.
into question, you must have thought, gosh, did I make the right call?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very personal thing, because it affected people in very different ways. I mean, obviously, as a unit, we were really hit for six by the announcement, because it wasn't really anticipated. Um, I can, because I think I can talk freely about how we felt. I'm not at liberty to discuss certain elements of it, but yeah, we certainly were not not for six by the announcement. I think because I'd already done different things, and because of the stage in my career that I am at, it was sort of okay, that's not expected, but I was already thinking, hey, what's my next thing going to be? Whereas, and happily this hasn't happened. I know certain of my other colleagues were looking around thinking, what on earth are we going to do? Because that's what they do. They were relying on it. I mean, one particular person, both her and her partner were full-time employees in jobs that were about to disappear, with a young family. So that's a very different situation to me in my advancing years, having to deal with it. So yeah, it was a big shock, and of course what was amazing was the amount of support from every level, particularly of course within music, and even more particularly from certain choral societies banding together for the video that Sam Evans put together. I mean, that was amazing, and obviously personally it was fantastic support for us. But we knew it was a much needed support for what the singers are and represent, and to try and put a sort of break on the disappearance of music of certain types, if we could do it. So yeah, the whole
Yeah.
thing went from terrible to amazing, and then we've been very happy with the results, obviously.
Well, yes, and so have we all. And I said this to Ed actually when we were talking, but I was at the first night of the proms, and for that sort of over a minute long sort of ovation just
Yeah,
for BBC Singers, and then again actually at the end, after the sort of solution had been arrived at, the same thing happened again. I mean, there was a huge outpouring of public support, which
yeah,
gives us some hope, doesn't it, really, in heart that.
absolutely. Um, and also, I mean, there was international outcry, but also from outside the music world within the UK, from surprising places, even within government, and when you looked at the mainstream press as well, to have the Telegraph and Guardian agreeing on something, that's pretty good. So yeah, it was all very heartening. And yes, as you say, I mean, I'll never forget that response we got at the first night, because I think by then things had been put on pause, and then certainly by the last night, and I've got a very personal angle on the last night, the proms that year, because by then it was very much yeah, this isn't going to happen. It was great. But to uh, I had to do a solo um, in one of the big pieces, and so I took a solo bow, which is always pretty weird because of the way it's formatted. And if you were there, you would know, because you've got the whole of the orchestra, and then we're all right at the back on ramps and stuff. And so I was just standing up all on my own. But the applause I got was totally out of proportion to the tiny bit I'd done. But again, it's because I was taking it on behalf of the group. So that, it was a moment I'll never forget, in both occasions.
Terrific, terrific. Well, we should move on and talk about Elijah because
Sure.
that's when we're gonna see you. Um, you've obviously sung it before, and we've already referred to that. Have you ever have you sung the sort of title role, as it were, or has it been mainly in the chorus? Well, tell us about
I
past.
think if I were to tot up the number of times I've performed it, the vast majority would be me singing in the choruses. And then I've had the good fortune to sing Elijah, the part of Elijah himself, on several occasions. So I've had, I can speak from both points of view, um, and yeah, and some memorable performances. I mean, I'd like to say my solo performances are memorable, but the ones I remember are not those. Except one key thing, which I remember being advised. I think it is some time ago now, but I was going to be doing my first one for a choral society, and I apologise because I just can't remember who it was for. And there's this. I was doing a show abroad with a mainly British team, and there was one well-known Wagnerian baritone who just gave me one bit of advice. He said, "Make sure you don't sing too much in the rehearsal." So I won't mention his name, but originally hails from the Liverpool area originally, and I asked him why, that because it obviously sounded like a personal thing he was passing on. I'm very grateful. But because the first time he did it, he'd been off to music college. He'd started to do great things, and he was the local hero returning to his local choral society, and he got very excited, and basically he said he was showing off, and he basically sang himself out in the rehearsal because he was trying to make a glorious noise, and by the time he got to the concert he could barely get through it. So that's always been in my mind, and it's very good advice because I mentioned Simon Keenly's side earlier, and as you did too, and he was singing Elijah in a concert we did in King's Chapel just a few months ago, and he's a great singer, and I've had the good fortune to meet him a couple of times, just for other reasons. And I noticed he absolutely did that. He was barely singing it in the rehearsal, and then he was, phenomenal when it came to the actual thing.
I listened to it. It was great. It was a great concert,
Yeah,
wasn't it? I really
yeah.
enjoyed it. I've also been listening actually to a 1968 recording, Raphael Frubeck de Burgos, where the baritone, the Elijah, is Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau,
Oh wow.
which is
Yeah, yeah,
another experience.
yeah.
Astonishing to hear him.
Or Dietrich official discount, as I always call him. So, yeah, he's magnificent.
But it's, it's
Magnificent.
it's very interesting what you say about not sort of overdoing it in the rehearsal. I was going to ask you, whether you had any tips for the choir because it is such a sort of it demands so much stamina as a piece, doesn't it?
Mm,
Not just for the soloist, but for the choir as well. So I mean,
absolutely.
actually, we should heed that advice as well and just hold quite a bit
Yeah.
back in the rehearsal.
I mean, obviously, it has to be with the agreement of your conductor, because it's amazing how people vary. Because some of them want to know it's all there, but I think I mean, emotionally, I think you always save a bit for when it's that adrenaline of the performances always gives you another gear. And I'm talking about whichever parts you're doing, and it's great because everyone's important. That's what I love about singing. It's just such a team effort from players to singers. And when I say singers, I'm not separating solo or chorus. It's everyone's important.
Well, Richard,
But yeah,
Richard,
if there's room to do it, once the conductor knows that the loud bits are going to be loud and soft bits are going to be soft. It's worth saving it a bit. Um, as long as the tuning and stuff doesn't go, it just depends on people's skills and things. But yeah, it's good advice, and I think in that piece particularly because there's a lot to do, and it's very dramatic.
Indeed. Well, Richard Pierce, our conductor, whom you know well, is
Yes,
when we're rehearsing the numbers towards the back of the work, he's saying to us always, you will be exhausted by this point.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very long and demanding sing, so you really do have to pace yourselves. Um, but anyway, we will, and we will look forward to doing our best. So are there any other sort of really memorable moments from past Elijahs that you can share with us?
Um, I think well, the most recent one as I've just referred to is because it was just so good, and Simon just imbued the whole thing with such drama as you'd expect he would, and he's in every positive sense he's quite an idiosyncratic performer because he means every word, and it really brings out the drama. But it also made me think of I was lucky enough to tour it again as a member of the chorus. Gosh, this is about around 2010. We were singing the piece through a lot of the big concert halls in Europe. But what I think of with that in every case, it was David Wilson Johnson singing it, and again he just it was like a masterclass listening to him do it. Because he was again he does it his way, as in a way that it always should be. Everyone has their take on what it means to them. So yeah, I don't remember any performances for mishaps or the day we couldn't find the stage or something, because these things all do happen.
Well, that's
That's
very
the,
good
the
to
great thing
hear.
about touring.
Let's hope we don't. Let's hope we don't break the
Yeah,
duck.
yeah,
But of course,
exactly.
we're majoring understandably on the kind of baritone part, but actually
Mm,
the other soloists have some quite demanding things to sing as well. And I'm going to be talking. We're very lucky to have three young students at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama,
great.
and I'm going to be talking to them actually in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm sure they're looking forward to singing it with you, Andrew, as well. And it's a wonderful. It's going to be great to have such a contrast of an experienced professional singer and three young up and coming, hopefully stars of the future. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great concert.
No, looking forward to it. You just reminded me of something that it was a Messiah I did. Funny enough, again in Cambridge, but this time as a soloist, and as a young lady doing her first ever soprano solos in it, and she was visibly nervous as we waited to go on, and I said, look, don't worry, there's no way, nothing's going to go wrong, and even if it does, the band, everyone knows it so well. And of course she was fine, and then we got to the the one of my um, Why Do the Nations? Sorry, I was struggling for the title. The half the orchestra went off at twice the speed of the other half. So 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 by the time I came in, I just had to stick with it, even though I had complete cacophony going on. And that's when it's lucky when you know a piece well, it's very handy because I could just stick to my guns. So that was I was sort of amused a little bit by that, given what had happened, the irony of it. But it got better because by the time we got to the trumpet shall sound, they were doing it with the dark harpo. So we'd been through the A section, B section, back to the start, and the trumpet went from the wrong point. So we then did the repeat with the trumpet but sounding 10 bars out from everyone else. And he only stopped playing. The conductor was waving at him to stop, and he didn't notice. It was only when the timpanist knocked his music off his stand that he stopped playing. So there you go. So you never know what's going to happen. It's however well prepared everyone is. It's that's the beauty of live performance.
Well, indeed it is, and we're all looking forward to it very much. So, Andrew, thank you
Hopefully not with
again.
things like that going on.
No, exactly. We could do without that, but everything else you said is, I'm sure, will be an inspiration to my colleagues, and we really look forward to seeing it with you on the 22nd of March.
No, I look forward to it too.
Thank you.